We try to be really clear in our vision, and then we try to empower our leaders across the institution to realize that vision in their own way. We're all pointing towards the common goal of creating access and supporting our region. Most people across the United States are actually taught at regional comprehensive universities. We don't have the same budget as an Ivy League institution, but we can have a similar impact. That impact is going to be very different, right? We look at this and we say we can have enormous value if we do this work. It's really important, actually, I think, for the betterment of the country and of our region.
Hello and welcome to the Future's Clear Teach Like It's 2045 webcast series. My name is Scott Carr from CESA 2. Today's topic area is creating an impactful university approach for career and community readiness, the UWGB way. Joining us today is Mike Alexander, who's the Chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, and Jess Lambrecht, the Executive Officer of the Division of Continuing Education and Workforce Training at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Mike has been a Chancellor at UWGB since 2024 and was previously the Vice Chancellor. Prior to that, he's held leadership roles at the University of Northern Colorado and Kennesaw State University. Jess has been with UWGB since 2021. Prior to UWGB, she served as the Assistant Vice President for Cooperative Education and Career Readiness at Lakeland University. At UWGB, she leads one of the largest divisions on campus, overseeing programs that provide lifelong learning opportunities for individuals and organizations. We definitely are going to dive into that. Appreciate you both joining me today. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having us, Scott.
You betcha.
Agreed.
You betcha. I'm sure at the time of year being June, just coming out of a full year, I'm sure you guys are still busy. Unlike some of us in education, K-12, it's kind of our season to unwind and relax a little bit. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days. So let's just get started right off. Let's move in to it. Let's tell us a little bit about your how did you get where you're at? Kind of a little bit of the backstory. Jess, why don't we start with you?
Sure, happy to. So I've been here at the university, as you noted, for several years. My background has really been in the career planning space. And more than anything, I pride myself in being able to connect industry with education. Being a liaison is oftentimes we use a lot of jargon and complexities to education and learning. And more than anything, we want to simplify that so our employers can hire those with significant talents and skills. And we're mindful as a university of how we continue to upskill and reskill the workforce. As we know, we're in a rapid pace of change in so many ways. So in partnership with our campus leadership, I work very closely to identify gaps and strains in our workforce needs to be able to best support our region and frankly, the state. And so I've been privileged to be in a role where we can expand our reach in very creative and unique ways and be strong thought partners alongside industry leaders. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, thanks. So like Jess, really proud to have been here over 6 years now as Chancellor at the university. And we are really excited about the direction that we are going. My background actually was in music. So I was an orchestra conductor. And the reason I mention that is when I was a conductor, I conducted the Georgia Symphony. And in that time, was really interested in thinking about access for people into classical music. So how do you think about what avenues you have for people to not necessarily who don't know they like classical music because they're just not exposed to it in a way that would make it accessible. But if they are, I found that they typically really liked it. And I think as I moved then into education, I think it's a very similar parallel. So that really what we're about at UW Green Bay is creating access to education throughout people's lifetime, to understand how it helps them grow just for the sake of growing, which is really important, and also how it connects to their careers. And that's really key as a higher education institution. We really think about our role everywhere from pre-K all the way through retirement. right? And that's why what Jess does is so important to UW Green Bay is we think about this in all ways you can get educated, from whether you're coming as a traditional 18-year-old student to UW Green Bay for what would be a traditional degree, whether you're coming for one class, whether you're coming because you audit, whether you're coming because of community connections, whether you're coming for workforce development, whether you're coming to experience a cultural event at UW Green Bay or an athletic event, all the ways that universities should provide access and resource to their communities. That's how we try to think.
Yeah, that's great. I love the history that you just gave us about yourself and also with you, Jess, the information that you shared with me and kind of your background, and plus getting to know you just recently here. I can feel that you're very passionate about not only the educational approach, but the workforce development, the economic development piece to it, which I think is really, really key. I'm so glad I stumbled across meeting you, Mike. Where we met was at Luxembourg Casco's reverse career fair. As you know, I'm working with Mike over at Luxembourg, and what a great event that was. Was not surprised to see somebody from a university be there, but I was really happy to be able to meet you and get to know you a little bit better. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect and partner together because I think that's really what it's all about. So,
We agree.
um, yeah. As we kind of start out the podcast, we like to talk about the big question as to why does education need to shift, need to change, need to transform? And I know the vision of your work, Mike, plus your team with Jess and many others, that you're doing some amazing things. But I want to hear from you. Why do you believe education needs to transform? Why we need this? Why we need this type of a change? Mike, why don't we start with you?
So I think if you look at the history of higher education, it primarily was designed in a way to serve a very small subset of the
Mm,
population. And really, in the United States, I think one of the things that has been a really amazing thing in the country is that the United States really started to think about higher education in a way that was much broader, right? And as a result, you can see the effect that's had on our economy.
mhm,
You can see why that's made us, superpower, leader in the world, right? Through largely, it's coming through the fact that we have this incredibly well-developed system of higher education that includes technical education all the way through universities. And I think where it primarily needs to shift is understanding now how to provide access throughout someone's life to this work. So we used to think, I think, in higher education was around that, you came into higher education at 18 and something you came right out of high school. You did
mhm.
it for 4 years straight. You lived in a dorm, and then you went off and you did your career. And usually that meant you were going to do one job, right, throughout your career. And if you look at how the world now works, right, it's very different. And technology is one of the huge drivers of this, right? So the big shifts I think we have to make is understanding how to make higher education available across a person's lifetime. And do you really need it all in a 4-year chunk, or do you need it in bits? Depends on when you're getting it and what your life situation is. And then secondly, how do we think about technology in the current world, and how do we make sure we're shifting the way we're teaching to be able to still provide value when we used to come to higher education because you needed information. Now you have information, right?
Mhm.
And what we really need to now is to help you be able to interpret that information, create human connection, right? And make sure that you're able to contribute in no matter what job you're in, right? So your job is probably going to change many times over your career now. And how do we prepare students to be able to thrive in that environment and be able to use technology as a way to support their education, not have it be in place of their education? And those are the shifts, the big shifts that I think I see happening in higher ed right now that hopefully we are trying to address here at UW Green Bay.
Yeah, and doing a great job of it. Jess, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I echo Mike's thoughts, obviously, and one of the many reasons that I enjoy my work here in particular is because we definitely have a vision as a campus
Mhm.
to differentiate in so many ways, and I think so important for our region to be able to thrive. I read a book not too long ago, and it's called The 100-Year Life Cycle, and it's essentially the concept how 50 years ago we would lived in an era where you had education, you worked, and then you retired, which we've essentially had to flip that upside down, right? And we know that most individuals are in a job for only 2 to 3 years at a time before they want to make a change. They
Yep.
pivot industries, they are looking for a way to differentiate themselves or add a new skill set, et cetera. And I think that's one of the incredible ways that UWGB has continued to thrive and evolve is recognizing that we need that constant influence of new information and technology and how the shelf life of information is just so different today than it was when higher education was initially established, right? So I think that's why we have to continue to modernize the educational environment and recognize that individuals time and ability to spend in education as well as their attention span becomes much more fractionalized than we've ever seen before. So how do we give a learner an experience that will get them the
Mhm.
skills and understanding that they need to perform a task or to influence a change within their own organization, but in ways and formats and structures that are going to fit within their lifestyle? Because we lead very complex lives, and right, the family dynamics and economic impacts that we're all experiencing now have changed how we need to take in information and be able to thrive in a particular role or opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, that's very well said. And I know you're doing some outstanding work at UWGB around that. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the what, kind of the unique things that you guys are doing. Um, from what I understand, and I think this is remarkable regarding your university, is that you're one of two that are actually growing in the state of Wisconsin. So I think that really says a lot about not only your university, but what you're choosing to offer and to do. So, Mike, with that, and you've been very vocal in moving UWGB forward beyond really that traditional university structure. What are some of the unique initiatives or that work that you have implemented or you and your team have implemented that falls outside of that basic standard academic system?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I think one of the things that I'm excited about is we're starting to see now growth across more universities in the UW, which is great to
Yeah.
see. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this, but there's several things that I think we've tried to do to think about how this works a little differently. So the first is around when we get involved in the educational process. So we ask ourselves all the time, how can we be of value to external partners? And I think the first way I would
Mhm.
describe this is we have a program called Rising Phoenix, where we look where there are gaps, where school districts might need UW Green Bay to support because they're in a rural area and maybe can't provide enough advanced classes for students that are on a college track. Maybe there are students who don't see themselves in higher education or just want college credit in high school because they need a certain amount of credit to launch their career. Um, and we work really closely with school districts. In Rising Phoenix's case, we're saving people across the state millions of dollars in totality. We have now hundreds and hundreds of students every year who are graduating with an associate's degree in high school. When they're finishing high school, they're getting
Wow.
their high school degree and their associate's degree with us at the same time. The student is still fully in the high school, right? So we're not taking them out of their high school experience. We're just launching them faster into their to their educational pursuit and their career, right? They only have essentially 2 years left to take college to be able to graduate, and the success rate of these students is unbelievable because they're coming into college with the full confidence and know that they can do this as they go forward. And the great part about it from our perspective is that less than a third of those students actually go to UW Green Bay. We love when they come to Green Bay, right? But we're also really happy when they go any place in the state because we're really interested in social mobility, right? So everything we're doing, we're trying to think about how does this help a student have social mobility in their life and for their families, right? And this is one way. The other way is through direct admission. right? So we were the first university in the state of Wisconsin to create direct admission, where in other words, we are saying that if you want to be educated by us, we're going to educate you. And this is a huge shift in the way higher education thinks, right? For years, higher education has prided itself on how many people we can exclude. That's what made you an elite
Wow.
institution.
Yeah.
Right? How many people
Good
can we
point.
deny? That's what makes us great. Okay. And we've looked at it quite the opposite. How many people can we serve? That's what makes us great.
Wow.
Right. And then finally, and I think I'll turn this over to Jess if it's okay with you, because I think she could really talk about this. It is how do we then look at non-credit work, right? So when you think about higher education, we typically think about it only in one way, which are in 4-year degrees. But that's important. We're still going to need those. Like if you want to, for example, if you're an engineer, a nurse, you want to make sure that person has got a fully accredited degree that you're confident that person is going to be great at their job when they go out. But not every field is this way, right? And how do we think about this in terms of where do you need credit work and where do you need non-credit work? And how can a university be of value there? That's the other big way. And I think Jess could talk about that better than me because she's leading our efforts there. But that's something I'm really proud of. Over 100,000 learners now that we serve in this method.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
To add on to that, Ray, the space of, again, what I go back to is bite-sized learning based on where someone is at in their career journey in their space. Of that 100,000, we have a significant population of learners who don't have any formal education, and higher education in particular can be often intimidating for someone who has never been in that environment before. So we very much recognize from an access and acceptance rate that we want to invite them into the space. So we offer all kinds of self-paced trainings, 1 hour, 5 hours, 10 hours in nature to invite them to the table, if you will, to then consider how do they stack those types of experiences to work towards a credential or a certificate that will help differentiate them in the marketplace or ensure that they have the qualifications to be able to perform a task. And then again, on top of that, inviting them back again for potentially a degreed program or other types of offerings, because we know that learning, again, comes in different types of format structures based on life and career interests. So we try to make sure that we have a variety of offerings so that when someone says, I need learning and this is the type of content I'm looking for, that we respond to that quickly. And I think the part that I've been most appreciative about our continuing education space is our ability to be responsive. In our academic degree programs, and Mike knows this especially well, it can often take us years to develop the format and structure to deliver a new degreed program. Might very well be needed, but it takes us higher education, no matter where you are, years to be able to do so. In the continuing ed space, we can ideate and develop a concept and be able to deliver on it within 3 to 6 months. We can move at a rapid pace to be responsive because we know technology is changing, because we know an industry needs something to lift and launch today. They don't have time to wait for someone with a 4-year degree. So that's again where that responsiveness and listening to our employer community and our learners on what they're looking for has helped us significantly grow in the last several years. And quite frankly, we're very proud of it. I think in higher education, we tend to be very humble about our offerings. And frankly, my goal is to be able to share that far and wide. Because it is so important. People need to know that higher education can be a space for them to learn in, and they are welcome in every stage of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some great opportunities, if you would, for more than just the individual that wants to go on to a university or a college. That's really, really cool. Jess, what I know you not all that well, hoping to get to know you better because of the great work you're doing, but I can sense a high level of creativity in your thinking, high level of passion to either one of you. But what was the catalyst that drove you and your university to move towards this direction?
Mike, do you want to actually take the lead on that one? Because I
Yeah.
mean, you're the impetus.
Well, I think one of the things I would just say is that I think we're largely the accumulation of really great leaders here who are doing this work. So I appreciate what Jess said earlier in the podcast, actually, that we try to be really clear in our vision. And then we try to empower our leaders across the institution to realize that vision in their own way. So the work that Jess is doing is going to be different than another leader who's leading another part of the university, but we're all pointing towards the common goal of creating access and supporting our region.
Mhm.
I think the impetus for that comes, um, you know, I believe that, like in all things, higher education is often talked about like a monolith. Okay, so we often think about it in terms of like how you see higher education in the movies, for example, right? You're looking at most people think about higher education that everything looks like Harvard, but
Mhm.
it's not,
Mhm.
right? Most people across the United States are actually taught at regional comprehensive universities. And the thought process behind this really became when you think about this in terms of budget, right? So one of the books that I really love is Moneyball.
Mhm.
Um, and if you don't like the book, you could watch the movie, right? And that to me was really changed my life. It changed my life in music and it changed my life in education, is that we don't have the same budget as an Ivy League institution, but we can have a similar impact. That impact is going to be very different, right? But it's really, really important, right? We teach, as I look at it, every year, over 111,000 people at least, right? And many, many more they're accessing in other ways. That's a massive impact for a budget of our size, right? So yes, we are billions of dollars short in our budget of an Ivy League school. So
Mhm.
we can try to become like an Ivy. Okay, that there's nothing wrong with that. They do important work. It's really great work. Or we can realize what impact we can have with our size of budget. And to me, that's our version of Moneyball, right? We look at this and we say we can have enormous value if we do this work. It's really important, actually. I think for the betterment of the country and of our region, that the work that regional comprehensives do, and that's why we do it. And then we empower people like Jess to make that a reality in their areas. So, Jess, I don't know if that's a good way to toss it to you.
No, absolutely. As you mentioned, Scott, I mean, uh, I like to be very creative and
Mhm.
nimble and responsive, right? And so I think this position in particular has allowed me a lot of opportunity to lead a significant team, but to amplify what we do and how we go about it. I think, again, the institution has prided itself on affordability and accessibility. That is very much a lane I can very much lean into and be able to support. It's because it's not about pricing us out of the market space to make us so out of touch with what people can afford to do. It's about delivering learning for those who have a hunger for learning. And if you are motivated to do better and be better and, expand your skill set, like that, I can do every day. I like to work with community partners in particular, our area organizations and associations. We do a ton of work in that space actually to deliver learning within professional groups and spaces. That's how we've been able to get to our 100,000 and frankly be proud of it. And to just expand our reach in creative ways where, in a previous world that was just not possible. So think about opportunities to scale in significant ways.
Yeah,
So
and
Yeah,
Scott, just really quick, if I could just say, I think to Jess's
sure.
point also is really important. We we are not trying to be a global institution, right? And this is a
Right.
really key point to what you're saying. So we actually pride ourselves on being a really amazing local institution, and we're really comfortable with that. Like if we serve Northeast Wisconsin well, thereby serving the state well, we're totally good with that. And that's, I think, one of the key decisions that we made around this is that was going to be our mission. It wasn't going to be a global institution, right? It was going to be really great at serving our region.
Yeah. It sounds like you're making scalability realistic, with a really, really solid purpose behind it, which is exciting. I'm very curious though. Obviously the three of us have been in education for quite some time, and shifting mindsets away from a traditional approach is not easy. So I'm very curious as to what was it like with those people at the table initially? I'm assuming this has gone over time, but how did you drive some of the mindsets that might not have been in line with, this type of thinking?
So this is a really, really great question. I think there's a
Mm,
couple things that I try to keep in mind every day is I think it's important that you have to honor everyone's perspective here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that good leadership is about sort of the carrot or the stick. I don't think the stick really works. I think it has to be that in their own time and in their own way, they see where the university is going and want to be a part of the excitement of that shift. And I have to say, I have tremendous empathy for our professors who um, they spend an enormous amount of time preparing to be to become a university professor is not easy. You're
Mm-hmm.
going many, many years to school. You're becoming an expert in often a very specific thing that is needed in incredible ways. And most of us were taught in a very different way, right? So if you look at education, most people, their instinct is to teach the way they were taught, right?
Right.
Which is natural. Like you were taught this way, well, that's how I'm going to teach the next generation. And because of the profound change we're going into, I think we're trying to think about this in terms of how do we invite people to be a part of this. And that
Mhm.
shift has been, frankly, gradual, right? It's not been sudden. It's happened really over 6 years. And really, my predecessor here at UW Green Bay, I think, started this shift um, by getting the university to get engineering, for example, which was locally responsive. Like we hadn't had engineering at UW Green Bay ever. Which, if you think about it, we're in the third largest economic region of the state with
Mhm.
tons of manufacturing here, and we
Mhm.
had no engineering degree. We had
Mm.
no nursing, like 4-year nursing degree, which made no sense, right? So, how to do this, how to be responsive to your community. And that is what I think gets people excited, and they start to realize, oh, you can derive excitement. And the other thing I would say about this, the biggest shift we have to make still, and that we're in the process of making, but I think we've done an amazing job, and our faculty have done an amazing job, and our leadership's done an amazing job embracing this, is the concept of you don't get to choose who you teach. You have the choice, however, to honor everyone who's in your classroom and teach them really well.
Mhm.
In other words, we should be measuring growth, right? Growth is
Right.
that's what
Right.
we're doing. We are helping people to grow. That's what we're selling, right? The piece of paper that you get is just a piece of paper when you graduate from UW Green Bay. It really has no value. The value is that you have grown as a human being. You're prepared to do whatever work you choose to do. You're of value to society in all kinds of ways. And this is what we're trying to do in shifting this mindset, right? That this is really important, that we value everyone, like Jess says, who wants to learn. Uh, and that's also been a big part of our growth curve that we've, worked with people to help see the joy in that.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously it's working. So I took some good notes on that mindset shifting because it's part of a lot of the work that I end up doing to support districts in some of this great work that's needed. The Also, what I really appreciate, what I'm hearing here is you're creating an ecosystem, a support structure that's part of the community, the importance of not only workforce development, but that economic development. So that's really, really great work. Jess, I know that you're definitely a believer in this. Obviously, like I said earlier, you can hear it in your passion and interest. As you've evolved with this and you've developed, some of these creative and new ideas, what did you kind of at the front end, what did you think this could look like?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the part that I appreciate the most about this space in particular, is that the possibilities are endless,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there is always a need for learning. So what we think about in particular is where can we partner? That's when we see the greatest success is not when we can create a concept and just deliver for the sake of delivering, but it's when we bring together industry partners, thought leaders, groups of people that want to influence the curriculum on the onset of it and be proud of being a partner with us in that space and in that way. I think I've had some of the most joy because we've been able to actually expand our reach in meaningful ways. And I think about, as one of the highlights, if you will, and might be somewhat cheesy, but my first couple of years here, we partnered with the Green Bay Packers and we deliver a history of the Packers program. And at first, many of my colleagues around the table were like, "Why would you do that?" Right? Like,
Right.
what's
Yep.
the purpose behind it? I was like, because who doesn't love the Packers, especially in the state of Wisconsin? And if that helps invite people to our space of community of offering, and then they help recognize that we have other things that might be able to add value to them, that to me is a win, right? And interestingly, we are now training the tour guides and ambassadors of Lambeau Field. I think that's cool. So
Yeah.
again, thinking about thought
Wow.
partnership, and expansion of reach to bring awareness to what we do, but we certainly do that in very technical spaces as well, whether it's supply chain or change management or customer experiences, right? Like we can deliver from everything from a introductory level scale to something that's more high end, because we have the functionality and all of the assets to be able to deliver on it well. We just have to bring thought leaders in partnership with where we think the next space will be.
Yeah. Tell us, give us an example. I'm hearing a lot of great things that you're doing, but can you share maybe even a little bit of what your role is in your job, Jess? But can you give us a specific example? Like if I was somebody that dove into your website, came across some of the programming that you do, what could I engage myself in? What does it look like?
Yep, certainly. I'll even preface that when I started in this role, I actually didn't know much about the world of continuing education.
Mhm.
I saw it as very much a licensure-based environment and then recognized very quickly that it's much more than that. So we try to heavily focus on that workforce training concept because that's much broader in nature and more agnostic to different industries. I will say, one of our challenges is because we have so much variety is having our consumers, our learners navigate our website, so that they know where they fit in or what they might be looking for is something we're always trying to play with a little bit. We're getting better and better at it. But we offer a number of certificates, right? They're about 10 to 20 hours of training. Some of it is self-paced, some of it is in person, some of it is live virtual so that we can reach
Yeah.
broader audiences. We do a lot of personal enrichment. We actually serve about 1,400 senior citizens in our programming space for
Wow.
personal enrichment on things like bird watching and the history of the World War era, if you will. So we try to cover our bases in all ways, shapes, and sizes to ultimately fit for our learners. So obviously invite anyone to visit our website in particular. And if there's any way that I can be a conduit to someone's
Mhm.
learning of interest, whether we have it or not, certainly want to try and find the thing that's going to serve them best in an advisory type capacity.
Wow. Is your footprint the just your region, or is it the state? Is it the Midwest? Are you finding that people from all over are tapping into what you guys offer?
Within continuing education, we reach a national market,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
We serve a
Okay.
number of associations that are national in size, some international institutes that we provide training and delivery for. Certainly, our focus is our footprint here in Northeast Wisconsin, but we do not have a lot of hard boundaries and limitations to what we can do. So it really is more a matter about fit and mission alignment than anything, and partnership.
Yeah. Nice. I had a chance as I was diving in and seeing what you guys are doing. Came across the WIS Business website and the article that you guys were both featured in, talking about the relentless approach to education for everyone means being aware of your employers and your community needs. I think is kind of what it stated, and responding at the speed of business. That's what really caught my eye. Talk about that. What does that look like? What does that mean?
So I think we've tried to think of this in a whole bunch of ways. So first of all, as we develop degrees, we talk to our area businesses about what they want to see in that degree. right? So this is really important to us. Like if we're going to create a degree, we want to make sure it's of value to the people who are here in Northeast Wisconsin and that students see a through line, right? And in certain cases, right, that we're getting industry, in almost every case, actually, industry input into what they want to see in that graduate, right? Which we hope then leads to them hiring that graduate, which we're seeing more and more in our region. The second piece of this is continually thinking about our program array to make sure that we are offering the things that are relevant to Northeast Wisconsin, right? So, that if our community has a need, let's be the solution to help fill it, right? A great example of this is nursing, right? We know we have a massive shortage in nursing, right? So we have grown our nursing program as fast as we can grow it to be able to address this need, right? And so it's really listening carefully to our community for what they want to see their regional university be doing. That lets us move at a pace that is reactive to what's happening in the world outside of us. And that's in all ways, right? Not just in sort of direct career ways, but even in all ways that what are we teaching in the liberal arts, for example? Well, we're also listening to understand what skills our employers are looking for. They're looking for great communicators. They're looking for people who are curious. They're looking for people who are problem solvers. They're looking for people who can work with people who have different viewpoints than they do. Well, these are all skills you learn in the liberal arts, right? And are really important also to the workforce, right? So how do we make sure we're hearing these things and reacting as quick as we can to make sure that we're providing what's going to be, again, of value to our region? And then, like Jess said, I think also really important, we able to move in different paces in different parts of the university. That's also important. There are certain parts of the university that shouldn't move too quick, right? Because that change actually would be destructive. There are certain parts of the university it has to move really quick. We know that's Jess's area, right? It's able to be really nimble. As a university, we're pretty nimble, but we can't be totally nimble, right? Because there's a reason why you don't want to end your nursing program tomorrow and ship to something else. That has to be a much more gradual. I'm not saying we're ending our nursing program, but it has to be a more gradual evolution in those cases.
Yeah. Well, I think you got the right person in that role in Jess for sure. Just getting to know her over the last couple months here. With that said, Jess, I know you understand that economic development is a priority and it's more than just workforce development. What are some of the things that you do with business partners and the community to help guarantee that it's more about economic development and community growth than it is just filling, positions?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we have advisory boards all across the campus. I think that's another notable important piece that they are essentially like our focus groups of sorts. I think within my own division, I think we have 4 of them in particular that are, again, kind of our eyes and ears. I call them more than anything our ambassadors of our programs and our efforts. I think that's really critical that we are, again, responsive in that way. And I know many of my colleagues around the institution see that as important as well. I think one of the other elements that we're mindful of as well is just thinking about the different industry sectors or populations that we are missing in any sort of way. And before we launch a new program, it's about bringing together those sectors, those spaces, those businesses to ensure that is this the right thing we need or is there coverage there? Because, and as Mike alluded to earlier, we don't need to replicate and duplicate efforts across the board. That's not going to help anyone. What we want to do is to ensure a quality learning experience so that we keep our region growing and moving forward. And, I'll just end with one of the other aspects I'm really proud of as a university is we continue to strengthen our understanding of our graduates and where they're going. Most of our students come from our local region. Most of our students want to stay in this local region. So it would be foolish of us to not respond to that need and helping them be best prepared to work with our industry partners and leaders in the region. Our business partners are relying on us to provide strong skilling and educational programs that are going to help move their own organizations forward. And that's when we are of value to them.
Right. And I would imagine when you have that vision and can act on it and have those types of results, you're going to definitely have the support of your community, your business partners, which is really important. Mike, I'm curious here. Obviously, you have great people working for you, like Jess in your organization. Talk a little bit about what your leadership is like. What are the characteristics? What do you need to do? What's kind of a day in the life of Mike like, being the one overseeing so much?
Maybe Jess should answer that question better than me, actually. I, um, so, I don't actually, I don't think my job is any more complicated necessarily than anybody else's. I think, um, uh, you know, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about in UW Green Bay is that the university is um, it has a bit of a chip on its shoulder, in a good way, not an angry chip, but a chip that is it's
Nice.
passionate about doing good things, and helping people, and that to me allows it to be led in a really exciting way.
Mm.
I think one of the things that I get excited about every day here is that I think we are asking the right questions and having the right conversations, even if we don't have immediate, easy answers. Like I think what's happening in education right now is there's profound shift that is occurring.
Yeah.
And being humble enough for us to say that we don't have all the answers, but we're going to ask the right questions. And we're going to keep challenging ourselves. Scott, I like how you're describing what you do in this way too. Like, you know, we try to be humble, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because
Mhm.
like it is changing at a really fast clip. And so I feel like my job largely, and when you're asking about leading, is offering here, I think it might be moving this way. How should we react?
Mhm.
I feel like I try to send to the team articles all the time that I'm reading. I try to read all the time. I try to listen all the time to what's happening in our community. And I talk to other leaders in the community to understand how they're dealing with things like AI and other issues that are really impacting education. And I then try to share that with our leadership team. I am a firm believer that, particularly in an organization as large and as complex as a university or really any school district, that the best decisions happen as close as possible to the teaching. So you just have
Nice.
to empower people and give them the options to move in a direction. The point here's where we're trying to go, and then you have to trust them to move there. And I try to pride myself on that. Like you know, we have a lot of hard conversations at UW Green Bay. I love that about working here is that we can disagree, and through that disagreement, we usually find a really exciting way forward, because we're wrestling with really difficult issues as opposed to just saying we hope that issue goes away. And that to me is what makes you proud to work here and how I try to lead, maybe, I guess, to answer your
Yeah.
question directly.
Anything to add, Jess? Do you see that in Mike? I'll put you on the spot a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Again, one of the many reasons I'm here, I recall very distinctly sitting down with him prior to starting at UWGB and talking about how we have autonomy to make hard decisions and how supporting our leadership team to be able to navigate in the directions and the spaces we feel are best suited and in alignment with the university. I work directly with our provost, and she's equally as supportive
Mm.
and helping us navigate and know that she too doesn't have all the answers, right? But at least will help us in those thought conversations to encourage us to read more, to think more, to get some space to really ideate, to ensure that we're all
Yeah.
trying to move in the same direction. We just happen to see it from different perspectives, but we have a shared goal of providing learning for as many as individuals who have an interest and a need.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. We're getting kind of towards the end here, but a couple things I wanted to just cover quickly was the how. We're starting to understand in education that there needs to be a shift. Things need to look different. Our approach needs to look different. Um, if you were to give one or two or three first step moves for somebody in relationship on how to shift and move this direction, what would be your advice?
Uh, so this is a great question. I think we have to be willing to fail.
Mm,
So I do think it's really, really important that we give ourselves grace as we're trying to navigate the complexity of what you're describing, Scott. I think everyone understands we need to change. To change, we're going to have to take some risk. And risk means being vulnerable. It means that you have to say, we're going to try this and see if it works. And if it works, we're going to celebrate it. Frankly, if it doesn't work, we're going to celebrate it.
mm,
Because that means we're trying to do the right thing and we just maybe haven't found the right answer. So we talk here all the time at Green Bay, there's good failure. And I talk to our leadership team all the time about this. Like, if you're going to try something for the right reasons and it fails miserably, I'm going to cheer you and pat you on the back.
nice.
All right. I prefer that than you just standing in place. That to me right now is not an option. Right. And so providing that space would be the first thing. So be willing to take a risk. Maybe one other thing I could think of about is to try to see the issue through the eyes of a student,
Mm, love it.
right? So always be thinking about how is the student, if you were to ask the question to the student, how would they answer it? And can you meet the student where they're at? I think both, usually the teacher and the student want to go to the same place, but they're often trying to get there in a different way. And how to find middle ground and think about this through the lens of a student as you're making these decisions, and try something that may be outside of your comfort zone, but would be right in the comfort zone of a student. And I think that builds trust, and it also builds a shared experience in learning, which to me is the best learning. When both the teacher and the student are always learning, magic happens, in my opinion.
Love it. Great stuff. Jess?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, I think that's again one of the reasons I enjoy working here is there is a lot of understanding that not everything is going to work and we are not perfect. And so I've delivered my own programs that haven't worked well for a multitude of reasons, or a particular shift happens in the marketplace that is just not viable anymore for all kinds of reasons. So I very much appreciate, especially within the unit that I lead, a lot of flexibility to be able to create and design, and knowing not everything is going to work. I think a lot about, in the marketplace in particular, though, in education, we consider kind of that return on investment, time and effort. And so I think about practical application, practical scenarios, giving individuals what they need when they need it, to me is the most responsive way we can deliver an educational experience. And frankly, my goal is to help our learners be very proud of the learning experience that they have with UW Green Bay, whatever, again, format or space that might be in, that they become Phoenix through and through, just like we do. So,
Nice. Scott, really quick, if I could just say one thing just to build on what Jess said, because I think what you said is great. The other thing we ought to talk a lot about is try to find one thing you could stop doing. Because in order to change, right, you have to give yourself space to make that change. And that often means you have to literally choose something you're not going to do anymore so you can try something else. Because I love what Jess just said. That's what makes one of the things that makes her so great, right, is thinking about this in terms of what are we ending so that we can do this other thing.
Nice. Yeah, it's great advice. Before we get to our final question that I ask everybody, anything new on the horizon that you want to mention right now? And I'm assuming there might be a ton of stuff. So, but anything that you just want to point out right now while you have the opportunity for our listeners?
I just wanted to mention for you, Scott. I mean, one of the things I'm also very proud of in the last year for us as a university is we became an age-friendly designated institution. Really, what that does is recognize the fact that our learners come in all kinds of backgrounds, lifestyles, experiences. The average age of our undergraduate population is 25. That's not typical of most higher
Wow.
education institutions. But really, we mentioned earlier, I mean, I have 90 plus year olds in some of our programming. I think that is super cool. We're doing some more programming around mental wellness and having a sharp mindset later in life and how that leads to a more vibrant life as you age. And so I think about a lot of those things in particular that really continue to help influence how we are serving our broader community. I think is pretty cool. So, but
Yeah.
Mike, I'm certain you've got lots of things to add to it.
I'll just add one thing. Obviously, we have a lot going on, but the one thing I'm really excited about right now is the way we are starting to think about how business creation occurs out of the university. And we're really working with our students to not make entrepreneurship something that just occurs in the business school. That in the modern world,
Right.
everybody is an entrepreneur in essence. And how do you build that mindset of growth and of being able to sort of take your future into your own hands and be your own business in essence, right? No matter what field you're in. And that's one of the great things I think about the modern world is it provides great space for entrepreneurs to do this. And how does a university like us work with those students to that business creation is coming right through the university and into our communities to help it continue to grow?
Excellent, excellent stuff. Love it. All right, final question I ask everybody who is a guest. In our tagline, it says, teach like it's 2045. What do you think education is going to look like or should look like in 2045? Jess, curious.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I think the pace of change is only going to continue to be more
Mhm.
complex. So I think about what more can we do at the K-12 level in particular to provide a good understanding for our youth to realize some of the opportunities that might be ahead of them and knowing whatever they ideate today is going to change. So how can they best prepare for that? I also think a lot about how do we continue to differentiate in the market space? How do learners in particular continue to demonstrate the qualifications and the skills that they are earning and learning? We're actually working on a project right now that's all focused on skills-based hiring. I think is pretty cool
Mm,
in the sense of helping leaders
mm.
or
Love it.
organizations hire because they have more tools to be able to assess whether or not someone can perform a task. I think will also help us in many years ahead. So I think a lot about the K-12 space in particular, about how do we best prepare our youth to be agile and nimble so that whatever
Mhm.
types of trainings and needs that they have, they're best prepared to have a long career ahead of them.
So
Nice.
I love this question. I'm only laughing because I heard a really great speaker a couple weeks ago who said that anyone who's trying to predict more than 2 years out right now is taking a really big risk given all the change that's happening.
Right.
But I
Right.
actually I'd like to think this way, the way you're describing, Scott. And to me, if I had to guess right now, I think we're going to see more and more the importance of human connection as technology becomes more and more ubiquitous in what we're
Mhm.
doing. And I think teaching uh, is in some ways going to go back in a way that what the way it was pre-technology, um, in a way to be able to help us to live in a world where technology is ubiquitous, right? And I think this is going to be really important for the workforce and increase the value actually of why you would come into higher education. And again, like Jess is saying, I do see higher education becoming really important for people across a lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, you know, we put a lot of money into higher education across the United States. I think it's had a great return. And how do we continue to use the resource we put in there to help it advance our communities? Is how we're trying to look at it. And I think we're going to start to see more and more of that.
Nice. Great, great stuff. Love it. Appreciate you guys taking the time today to join me. If people are interested to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
You could email Chancellor at UW Green Bay. Chancellor at uwgb.edu. Chancellor at uwgb.edu.
Great, great. Jess?
Yeah, I would say visit our webpage. I'm happy to connect individuals in whatever space or fashion that might be here within the university. We're very active on social media,
Mhm.
on many of the platforms. We utilize a strong professional network on LinkedIn. So, hoping your listeners in particular recognize that they've got thought partners to participate in this journey alongside them.
Nice, nice. Well, thanks again, Mike and Jess, and keep up the great, impactful work that you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You betcha. And as we depart, remember, the future is clear. Take care, everybody.